How significant have these attacks on Ukraine been from Russia, both in the last 24 hours, but the last week or so?
Yeah, I mean, Wilf, they fit into a pattern. The Russians are clearly building up the air campaign against Ukraine earlier than they did last year or the year before, because they're trying to give the Ukrainians a really miserable winter by taking down the critical national infrastructure and the energy infrastructure, which is important not just to the civilians, but also to the military. But they're also look as if they're attacking residential areas. They claim they don't, but they do. Yesterday there was the big attack in Poltava, and that killed a number of people, a number of civilians, even though they say they were going for a military communications school that was there. And so when you look at these big attacks, I mean, there were, the Mariupol and Kramatorsk in 2022, and then Dnipro, and then the attack on the Wake in Hozra in 2023, they fit that pattern that the Russians are doing what they can with the air campaign to indicate to the Ukrainians that there's a price to pay for the Kursk initiative. There's a price to pay for carrying on. And so they're not terribly bothered whether they hit civilians or military targets, although they claim to the rest of the world that they don't target civilians.
Is the Kursk incursion hurting Russia, or perhaps less so than initially thought?
Yeah, right on both counts, Wilf. I mean, it is hurting them, but less so than they had hoped and the Ukrainians had hoped, because it is making a military difference. It is causing real disquiet in Russia, and there's some evidence is causing disquiet in the Kremlin itself. But the Russians are determined that they won't be seen to take troops away from the key areas in the south, in Pokrovsk and Chasiv Yar. And so, the relief that the Ukrainians really wanted to get hasn't really happened yet. They still may hope it will. They're still making progress in Kursk, even though that battle has now been going on effectively for about a week. The Russians really started to engage last week. So that battle will continue, and it may have unexpected effects. But so far, it hasn't had the single effect which the Ukrainians must have hoped for, which was to relieve Pokrovsk, which is 300 miles further away in the south.
Michael, talk to me about this reshuffle, if that's the right word, going on within the Ukrainian government. I guess it was sort of trailed and teased as if it was a positive and constructive thing. Also, though, seeing some high-profile changes, the Foreign Minister Kuleba on his way out.
Yeah, I mean, it has been widely trailed, and Kuleba was. It was said that he will be stepping down. I mean, the Minister of Defence stepped down some months ago, and now Dmytro Kuleba is down. The person who really surprises me, Wilf, is Alexander Kamyshin. And Kamyshin was the head of Ukrainian railways, very efficient, very good. Even in war, the railways were really well run. And he was transferred to be the Minister of Strategic Industries, which was basically the war economy. And he's exactly the right man. He looks like a Viking. He's got a sort of a punk haircut, and he looks like a man you don't tangle with. He's a youngish man who's got a sort of, he looks like something out of an ABBA tribute band. But he's very, very good. Now he is stepping down from the Ministry of Strategic Industries, and he said he will still be involved in a way to be determined. Now that's very strange, because you would imagine that he would be moved into perhaps an even more important job. But if that were the case, they would announce it as part of the reshuffle. So that worries me from their point of view. And as I make it, so far there's 8 big resignations. So 2 deputy prime ministers, the environment minister, the justice minister, the state property fund manager, and a presidential aide. So they've all resigned. And I think the President Zelenskyy, he wants to reshuffle because the economy's got to perform better and the government has got to perform better. And he himself is losing popularity in Kyiv itself. And so his Servant of the People's Party needs a refresh, and that's understandable after 2.5 years of war. But the worry for people outside is that this is more about loyalty than competence. We'll see if that's the case, but we'll be interested to see who steps into these roles now that a raft of people have resigned.